subscribe.
Hey y'all, welcome to the Clinical Cookout. I'm one of your hostesses, Auntie Shug.
Hey y'all, I'm Auntie Amber.
What's up, y'all? It's Auntie Ashley.
Hey, it's Auntie Quiche.
All right, we're here to talk to you guys about all things mental health and wellness. We are not your therapists, but we know a little something. So go ahead and hit them with the disclaimer, Amber.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. We are qualified clinicians who will cover various topics on mental health and will sometimes provide community resources. We are not being paid by any organization for our content, and any information we provide is general and pertains to our own personal experiences. We do not provide psychotherapy, diagnoses, or treatment recommendations on air. Any concerns related to your individual mental health should be directed to your medical and mental health professionals. We are not responsible for others' decisions or the subsequent consequences.
Okay, now that we got all that stuff taken care of, let's get into the hot sauce topics. So one of the things that have grinded my gears when it comes to relationships.
Now,
is,
you said it
Oh.
your ass crack?
Itches my ass. Itches my ass crack.
No.
Here we go. Let me back that up. Itches my ass. Okay, not grind my gears, but itches my ass. Is the question, what do you bring to the table? Can we talk about trash, garbage? Can we say that? Can we categorize it as that?
What about that pisses you off?
I don't know where it came from. Like I don't know if it was a Captain Samuels thing. I don't know where this started from, where now we started asking, and I feel like it's specifically seen in the Black community. Like, I don't see any other community ever talking or even asking that question. So it pisses me off because I feel like Black women are put on this, interrogation as to what we bring to the table, knowing damn well, like, do we have to pull up any statistics about what Black women do in their community? Do we have to go there? Like, why are we even doing that? Why?
I don't think that's not only in the Black community, because you get Filipino communities who they marry their youngest women to the older men, because guess what? Everybody's wondering what this man is going to bring to the table. People are trying to intermingle their families so that they can get better financial status. And so I think that is the way that we say it, what you bring to the table. But people been saying that. My mama been saying that since the beginning.
That ain't the same thing, though.
No, but it's typical for people to say, what does that man bring to the table? Yes, traditionally is, what can you give to my daughter? Because if we think about it, we live in a patriarchal society. We always have. So it's always been a woman is taken care of, a girl is taken care of by her father, and then she is married off. So that man has to be able to take care of her. What Keisha's saying is it's not typical. It has never been traditional or typical for men to be asking women, what do you bring to the table? Like, that's not traditional in any sense of the word for men to be asking women that question. What you described was people asking the man that question. That's altogether different. That's traditional.
Well, let me ask you a question then. So, if you're talking gender and society and men having to prove what they bring to the table, why is it not fair that women have to do the same thing? If we want to be equal.
Let me answer that. The reason why that's an issue is because men set up the system, and then they're mad because we're actually holding them accountable for the system that they set up. So now we're asking you to be providers or whatever you call yourself wanting to do. And then when you actually have to be, when you actually have to do those things, now all of a sudden it's an issue. We don't ask women, can you cook and clean? Because that's for being a woman's role or whatever they want to say, because we automatically assume that that's what a woman's going to do because that has been the system for a long time. If we're asking men to be providers because that's the system they set up, and then they don't want to do that, why are you asking me what I bring to the table if you don't even want to abide by your own rules?
That's the difference. The different, that's exactly what she said. At the end of the day, you can't say I want to be treated like a king or treated like a man. Or okay, so are you acting like a king? because a king provides. So a king would never ask his queen, what do you bring to the table? It just doesn't work like that. And that's the only time we as women win at a double standard. Not to say that winning at a double standard is important, but it's really the only double standard that benefits us. And I mean, at the end of the day, I'm more of an egalitarian mindset, meaning everything should be more like equal. So I don't mind showing what I bring to the table.
So I can understand what you're saying. Like maybe not in the very first conversation that you have with somebody, sitting down at the table and being like, well, what do you bring to the table? I understand that, but I was raised by a single mother. And being raised by a single mother, you had to have somebody who's matching what you have. You have 3 kids. I have a job. I'm working. I'm trying to build something. I'm trying to raise these kids. So I can't bring somebody from the streets busted and disgusted and not bringing anything to the table to come in my house and mess up with the flow that I have with me and my kids. Same for single fathers. I know a lot of single fathers raising their kids. And the last thing you need when you're raising your kids is some raggedy female coming in there trying to infringe on whatever you have, worried about what you bring it to the table because it's so what a patriarchal society and not bringing her half to the table. So I believe that in a relationship, you should at least match energies if that's the agreement.
Yeah.
So it's not a problem that the person wants to know what you're bringing to the table. It just doesn't need to be like at the forefront when you meet somebody. All right, what's up? You got like, are you providing? That's what we ask men. Are you going to be able to provide for me? Because if not, I'm not moving forward. That's a whole topic in itself too. You got women out here that want men to support them 100%. Like they're supposed to pay all the bills. They're supposed to do everything, and all the woman is supposed to do, I guess, is take care of the home. Like this is how we've been conditioned and trained. But yeah, so that's what you're saying. Like it's okay to have to like bring whatever to the table and let that person know like this is what I'm bringing. Well, implicitly, not explicitly saying that.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't need to be something you're asked like at the very beginning of a relationship.
And maybe that's different for y'all.
I think
maybe that's different for y'all because y'all married. But for me in the dating world, I like don't even if that even come out of a man's mouth, I'm getting up right from that table and we are not speaking because there's nothing for us to talk about if this is the mentality that you have. Like I don't play that, and every man I've dated has never asked me that question. They come correct and I'll come correct. What's understood don't need to be explained. So if my actions are showing that I'm not stepping up to the table or stepping up to the table. If my actions are showing something that you don't like or that you feel like I can improve in some areas, that's where we have that conversation and communicate. But if you automatically asking me right off the bat, oh, what you bring to the table? Like, and then the moment I say I'm educated or anything, now that's a strike against me. Or now, if I say this, it's a strike against me. I don't cook, I don't clean. Like, I ain't doing,
And you know what?
I do other things, though.
Now that you said that, I'm wondering if, like, sometimes people ask that question. Because, some men, like, they say they want a strong, independent woman, right? But then they get in a relationship with a strong, independent woman, and they want a submissive woman. And that's a whole other topic, too, right? Like, what does submissive mean? You want this woman to do everything you say. You don't want her to say nothing back to you. You don't want her to speak up for herself because you providing, because you paying all the bills, and you doing this, that, and the other. And, like, that's just, like, is that what you want? So when someone says that they're educated and they're resilient and they've been through all this and they're doing this and they're doing that, they're in the community putting out all of this, is that intimidating for them?
I agree. I understand. I agree. I guess and this is where we can tie mental health into it, because a lot of things just we learn from who raised us. Like I was raised by a single mother as well, but my uncles had a hand in raising me, and they are not the type of men who would ever ask a woman that question. Elijah, my husband, would have never asked me that question. So it's just, and you'll hear men say it now, depending on what type of man you're talking about, he's not going to ask that question. So for me, I'm looking at it like the standard of man that I'm used to, and not saying that those men were perfect, because trust me, none of them were. But the standard of men I'm used to as far as providing and showing up to that table, they're not going to ask their woman that question. So that's an implicit bias for me. And then it also doesn't help that most of the guys that I do see asking that question, they ain't bringing nothing to the table to be asking that question. So see, we've been married a while, so we've been out of the dating game. But I got a lot of friends who still single, and the men that are asking that, bruh, you ain't got no business asking that. You really don't.
And that's where I was coming from. Like, you don't ask me something that you ain't. And I understand, Shug, you talked about it being situational. Absolutely. I totally agree with if you have children, especially when children are a part of it, that may be more of a closer question to the beginning, so that way you're not putting somebody in your life that may impact your children negatively. I understand that. But for me, like Ashley was saying, people will ask that question. I watched a girl on TikTok talk about it, and literally it was the first question on their date. And you don't, like, how do I know what you got going on in the background? How are you asking me about something and you can't match my energy or have your stuff together? That's where I was coming from.
So you said it itches you. Okay.
It does. Like, now, let me be clear. I've never had a guy ask me that question. First of all, because they know better. Don't even think about it. Like, don't even, I should give off the vibe that that's not a question you should ever ask me. But I've watched, what I'm saying is I watched other girls or other women get asked this question. Specifically, black women is who I watch. I've never seen a white girl on TikTok say, oh, well, this guy asked me what I brought to the table. Never. Not once. Haven't seen it. All I see is black women all up and down my timeline asking, well, these dudes are telling me or asking me on the first date, what do I bring to the table? That's what I'm seeing. And I'm in the dating world. I'm single. So if that's what men are doing, don't try it.
So
I'm not the one
mental health though,
at all.
you said it itches you. So obviously something in mental health is got something to do with mental health. We all thinking it.
You know, I honestly, if you want me to be totally honest, a lot of black women that I see ask this question, I feel bad for. And what I mean by that is it's almost like they're losing confidence in who they are because they're being picked apart. Everything about them is being picked apart. Oh, what do you bring to the table? Why you wearing that? You ain't this size. Colorism, texturism. You too independent. I want you to be more submissive. Or I'm not, now that you submissive, now you don't bring nothing to the table. Ain't nobody taking care of you. It is literally day in and day out is what I see on TikTok every 5 minutes with a black woman being picked apart about what she isn't doing and what she is doing. So I think that can start to tie into uh, people just not feeling confidence. And we know how important confidence is when you are trying to be in a relationship or looking for your partner. And so what I'm starting to see is a lot of black women are being vulnerable about it, like actually like being tearful on social media, like this is not good, and or men hurt them, or emotionally is what I mean. And I just feel like it plays into your self confidence.
When you have low self confidence too, you also tend to just settle because you don't feel like you're worth the effort and the time to really get to know you and to know what you bring to the table rather than just asking straight out the gate. It's exhausting. It's exhausting for people to pick you apart like that and for you to lose that self confidence and not feel good about yourself to the point where you're just like, forget it. I'll just take whatever I can get.
Right.
And then where do you go from there?
It's terrible. It's like black women in particular, we are considered too much and not enough at the same damn time. We too much and we're not
always. Damn, right. say that one more time, Auntie Ash, because golly.
We are considered too much and not enough at the same damn time. And it's like, what do you do? That will literally drive you insane. This is why you have so many black women in particular who enter therapy and they are dealing with generalized anxiety and major depression, because it's like, I'm in this rat race trying to be this person and play this role and not be too much. And I want to be independent and bring something to the table, but I need to submit. Like, that is sheer confusion for any woman that's trying to be in a relationship. Like, what do you want me to be? Today, quick pause, just tangent. Sierra went to an award show with her husband, Russell Wilson. And she had on, the outfit she had on was, Sierra sexy. The girl looked good. And Somebody said this
as
is why
fuck.
you can't turn a
Sexy
hoe
as
into a
fuck.
housewife. I'm like, when was Sierra a hoe? And y'all confused because do you want her to just, you get mad when you get married and your wife let herself go. Now you got this sex siren for a wife and you mad at her too. What do you want? What do y'all want? What is it? And Russell happy with his wife. So you sound really hurt and you projecting to say something like that. It's hard.
Question. You mentioned Black women and depressive symptoms. Our symptoms, as we know, our symptoms of depression can be different than every other culture's symptoms. Like some of our symptoms stem from being the strong Black woman. Y'all see my shirt. It stems from being a strong Black woman, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we have to be the strong Black woman because, like you said, we're too much and not enough at the same damn time. So talk about the depressive symptoms because you was about to hit on something.
Yeah, they show up very different. Like most of the Black women that I have worked with who I can fully diagnose as either generalized anxiety or major depression, it shows up different. They are workaholics. They do everything for everybody. They are perfectionists. They don't know how to make a mistake. They get anxious about anything going wrong. They are paranoid. It shows up in so many different ways. They're not going to be just crying in their bed, not able to get dressed and take a shower. That's not how it shows up for most Black women. It shows up as strength to the outside. It's this mask. But underneath that mask, you will find that those Black women are probably crying in the shower to cover their tears because can't nobody tell if you're crying in the shower. When she step out that shower, she's well put together. Right. So Black women, literally that strong Black woman syndrome is a part of the depression. It's like, nope, I got to push through. I got to be strong. I got to show up. I got to go to work every day. It's got to look this way. It's got to be perfect. I got to show up for my kids and my mama and my husband or my boyfriend. That's how it shows up for us. That's why people can never really tell when a Black woman is really depressed.
And that's even like that's the Black women that you work with, right? And that's assuming that that Black women go to therapy to deal with this, but not all Black women go to therapy. And why is that? Because like you're dealing with all of this, you have people like Keish was saying, pulling you apart, breaking you down. And then the thought of going to a therapist or someone else who could because we have trust issues too with people. Because of that, we don't trust people to share how we feel about certain things. We just kind of put on that face and keep it moving. So the thought of having another person in your life, someone you don't know, to tell them your most vulnerable things about yourself, to be sensitive and just like let all of that out is scary. And it's even more scary when you go into Google and you look up Black therapists or therapists in my state, city, community, and you get this whole list of therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, counselors. What? Then that's overwhelming too. Like I don't even know who to go to.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. So I think it's worth talking about that a little bit. Like, what are you looking for when you're looking for a therapist, and what does that look like?
So I have credentials as a provisionally licensed professional counselor, and that's a PLPC. Now, those letters are going to look different in different areas. It's really dependent on the state that you're in. But what a provisionally licensed professional counselor is, a PLPC, is someone who is a counselor. They are licensed, but the license is provisional. So that means that they're operating up under somebody else's license until they get enough hours to get their own license. Now, as a PLPC, I can diagnose, I can treat mental illness, any clinically diagnosable condition I can treat. And I do that through evidence-based interventions. Like if you have anxiety, we're going to go through some cognitive behavioral therapy. And what cognitive behavioral therapy is I think, therefore I am. That's the easiest way I can explain it. And so whatever you think, comes out in your feelings and it manifests in your actions. And so I treat those behaviors based on your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. I make them all marry each other. So another one of my credentials is I am a PsyD candidate. And what a PsyD is a doctor of psychology. So that does not mean that I'm a doctor yet. That means that I am, well, right now I'm in dissertation. It's hard, but I'm doing it. I'm also internship. And so after you get a certain amount of hours, you're able to defend your dissertation, and then they'll call you doctor whenever you graduate. Now, even while I'm doing that, while I'm a PsyD candidate, I can do the same things as a PLPC. I can diagnose, I can treat, I do assessment, and whenever you're looking for a therapist, you want to be looking for something specific. If you're looking for anxiety or depression, you can go to a PLPC, you can go to a PsyD candidate. Those are fields that I can help with. And more so than anxiety and depression, I handle some heavy hitters, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder. My point is that a counselor, soon to be psychologist, as a counselor, soon to be psychologist, I can handle all of those conditions.
All right. So, me and Shug, pretty much, she's doing her PsyD. I am not in that realm yet to go back to school. I'm just not there. I just graduated from my master's program in August.
Don't do it.
Eventually I'll get there, but maybe, listen, I'm cool. But so I am a LPCC, which is, that's another thing that I think confuses people, is depending on which state you live in, those letters are different. So Shug's LP, what is yours? LPC. Well, say it again.
PLPC.
PLPC. So her PLPC is the equivalent of my LPCC. They are the same, but she's in one state and I'm in another. So the lettering is different. So that's something that confuses a lot of people. They like, well, why is the lettering different? Basically, we are both provisionally licensed counselors under supervision, getting our clinical hours. So like I said, I graduated in August and currently have my own private practice, which you can have as a provisionally licensed therapist. And my background is in Christian counseling. When I got my bachelor's, I got it in Christian counseling because I really wanted to have that spiritual backing, because you will get some clients who want that incorporated into their therapy. So I wanted to be able to touch on that if I needed to. And of course, I grew up in the church, grew up Christian, so I felt like that would be good because I already had the background. But since starting, I have expanded so much in the area of spirituality. And as a counselor, you get to branch off. It's a lot more broad than some of your other mental health professionals. So you get to branch off, and you could possibly be a rehabilitation counselor or a career counselor. It doesn't have to just be a licensed professional counselor, but licensed professional counselor is very broad. So I see people for various things. I personally do not want to and likely will not work with personality disorders, because that's just one area that I don't want to do. And another thing you'll find is that there are populations that some therapists won't work with. Some people think that that's a bad thing. Like, why would you say you will work with somebody? But you have to know your own scope of practice and your limits. You, as a therapist, you do need to know what your limits are. Like, I know I can't work with sex offenders. It would trigger me too much, so I'm not going to do that. You don't want to cause harm to somebody trying to work outside your scope. So personality disorders, I'm going to leave that to your auntie Shug, because I ain't doing it. But I will work with anxiety, depression. I do a lot of grief counseling. With the pandemic, a lot of my clients came in because they lost loved ones and they did not know how to grieve, or they were struggling to grieve. So I've done a lot of grief counseling. I'm trained in trauma-informed therapy. And it's just very broad. My first supervisor told us that we should consider ourselves generalists, because we can work with anything because we've been schooled in everything, but you have your populations that you willing to work with.
Okay, well, yeah, kudos to you, Ashley, on working on grief therapy, because that is something I cannot do. But not cannot, that's one of my limits. I don't think that I can be objective enough with clients like that. I have issues with grieving loved ones that I've lost in the past as well. So that's one of those types of therapies that I try to stay away from, because it would be more detrimental to the client than it would be helpful. But anyway, so I am Amber. I have my PsyD. I'm a doctor of psychology as of this month, July of 2022. Whoop whoop. Defended my dissertation last month and will be graduating officially by the end of this month. So technically, I'm not doctor yet, but in my mind, I am. So as a psychologist, so I'm a clinical, will be a clinical psychologist. And that just means that I work with a lot of the moderate to severe mental and emotional disorders, like Auntie Shug shared a little bit earlier, some of those personality disorders, trauma, PTSD, all of those, like the more severe disorders. The difference really between a clinical psychologist and a counselor is just that we still provide the counseling. We can still diagnose from the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorders. Did I get that right? Yeah. I should know the name of that by now, shouldn't I? But we just say DSM. But one of the things that a clinical psychologist can do in addition to what counselors do is provide psychological assessment and evaluation. So if you've ever been referred for a psychological evaluation, that's just standardized testing that takes data and looks into your cognitive functioning. So like how you think, how you process visual information that comes in, or information that comes in that people say to you, verbal information. It can also look into like your academic achievement. So how you compare to other people your age academically with reading, writing, spelling. We look into personality traits and different things like that. And all of the information that you get from those tests and from that data kind of gives a comprehensive picture of the person. Now, there's some controversy around the standardized testing in our community, so I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit later, but that's generally the difference between a clinical psychologist and a counselor. There are also school psychologists, so if you have kids, then you know that there's either a school psychologist or a school counselor on campus at your kid's school. Again, the school counselor provides that emotional support, social support that the kids need. The school psychologist does the actual testing, the standardized testing. But the difference between a school psychologist and a clinical psychologist is that the school psychologist focuses more on the educational part of it. The clinical psychologist will they might focus on your academic stuff, but they'll focus more on your personal issues that you're having to manage. School psychology sticks directly within that educational scope, and it's mainly like, how are you learning things? Are you having a hard time with reading certain words, sounding out certain letters, seeing things on paper? And then how can we use that to help you learn better while you're in school? And then it kind of stops from there. You won't see a school psychologist as an adult, from what I know.
I am also a doctorate of clinical psychology. Me and Auntie Amber have the same background, except I graduated in December 2021. So,
Woohoo!
so I it's officially I'm officially done. But just like medical students, or they have to go through a residencies and postdocs, and so that is what I'm in right now. I'm 1 month out that I'll be finished with my postdoc, where I will be able to sit for my licensure exam, hopefully. So that way I can be a licensed clinical psychologist. But right now, I just have my doctor of clinical psychology. But I am also a licensed social worker. So I will be dually licensed once I sit for my exam for my doctor of psychology. And the difference between psychology and social work is that psychology is a little bit more focused on individual, versus social work is more based on macro. We look more at systems, but that's not saying that we don't focus on individual levels as well. What we're saying is that we look at policies, institutional policies, procedures that affects the individual well-being. And so we tend to start from a macro level, versus psychology tends to start from the individual level. So it's really cool to be a social worker. We're very marketable. You probably know a social worker somewhere. We work in all different sectors, with elderly, with children, with schools, hospitals, private sector, government, any any sector. You will find a social worker somewhere. Now, do I particularly enjoy being a social worker versus a psychologist? We might have a little slight edge as social workers, because we're just needed everywhere. We don't do testing. I would like to put that out there. Social workers do not do testing. Um, but social workers tend to be just in every little field and can help with a lot of things. Not saying psychologists, counselors, or anybody else doesn't. It's just that social workers, we have to learn various skills because we're needed in all areas. But other than that, I primarily work with mood disorders, and depressive disorders. So that's bipolar, depression, and then I work with trauma related disorders and anxiety related disorders. Specifically, I work with people who've encountered political trauma as well as religious trauma and work with the LGBT community. And my specialties include working with Black women's mental health and gun violence. I'm a real big advocate on studying gun violence. And then I recently transitioned over to working with children. So my specialty will be children. I love working from 10 to 17. However, in my new role I will be working with children 0 to 5. So I'll be working with pregnant women and children from 0 to 5, looking at autism, those neurodevelopment disorders, autism, ADHD, and things of that nature.
Wait, I didn't talk about what my specialties were. I missed that memo. I just talked about what I did.
I said it because I was like,
oh, just threw it all out. I'm like, wait, I didn't do that part. Can I just talk about what I do a little bit?
Yeah.
No, I just saying what they. Well, mine's not as extensive, but I do a lot of work with families and children. So I work with ages, I'd say 5. I don't really do below 5. It's a little difficult for me, but I work with ages 5 to 17, 18-ish, young adulthood, maybe up to like 21 or 22. That's like my favorite population. I work with ADHD, mood disorders, trauma. I've been getting into bipolar disorder, which is a newer area for me. But there are a lot of misconceptions about that disorder. So that's something that for our community too, I want to like help educate my clients on and their parents and help them like manage that, because that's actually a really difficult disorder to have as a child. Well, not a child, as a teen and young adult. But there are also symptoms of that manifest in younger children too. So with my experience, I'm able to help parents identify like, hey, you know what, this is looking like this might be something that we should consider. Let's monitor this. And these are some of the skills that you can start to work on early on. So I'm really interested in that, like getting in that early intervention with kids, helping them manage this through teenage years. Oh man, and teenagers, man, that is like the hardest. Like you've got hormones, you've got your peers, you've got your parents, you have so much going on. Honestly, if we could put like a mandate on insurance or something for every teenager to have therapy at some point, like at least once before they transition into teenagehood, I would put that out there, because it is a real, like that's a pivotal point in our lives. So I do work a lot with young girls, self-harm, suicidal ideation. That's like a big area that I'm really interested in now. I'm still trying to find my, what's the word? Niche, whatever that word is. I'm trying to find that. But there are a lot of different areas that
Let me just say kudos to y'all for working with kids, because that's another one that I actually can't do. I have children of my own and I love them. I really do. I love kids. I used to be a daycare instructor. I love children, but in this field, I would grow too emotionally attached, and I know my boundaries. I wouldn't be able to do it. It would be too much for me emotionally. I worked with one teenager. She was my favorite. I gave it a shot. I would work with her again, but I will never work with any more. 18 and up over here, and couples specifically. I am a couples, and a lot of therapists you will find do not like working with couples. I love working with couples. I'm couples. No couples for Auntie Keishney. I love working with couples. A lot of therapists find it very difficult. I thrive off working with couples. In fact, I plan on getting certified in sex therapy and psychedelic assisted therapy as well, but that's a whole nother avenue. But yeah, couples are my thing. I work with individuals all the time, love it, but couples are just that's my passion. So the kids, I can't do.
And also, but you mentioned in that, like that attachment that some therapists might get with their client. I mean, does that not speak to the passion that your therapist has for the work that they're doing is like, I am really invested in your success. I'm invested in my client's success. I get that too, where I'm like, oh man, I really don't want to let this kid go. I'm moving to a different practice. It's really sad. And prior to being a doctorate student, like when I was a case manager and working with kids with autism, I would stay in communication with my clients whenever I left. Especially my teenage girls, as a mentor, as support. Even to this day, if y'all are watching, y'all know who y'all are. I still communicate with them. I still lift them up and support them. Unfortunately, as a therapist slash psychologist, I can't stay in communication with them after that. So setting that boundary is important. But I feel like it does speak to your passion. Like, how do you identify if your therapist is real? Like, if they're like passionate about what they're doing versus if they're just doing it for the money.
I mean, and
from y'all's
that's
perspective.
that's a valid question. But knowing the thing is that passion would overtake me. Like if I had a teenage client, like you said, you work with girls who deal with suicidal ideation, cutting. I am going to be concerned about that child for the bulk of my day. I wouldn't even be able to focus. And so when I say it would consume me, it would consume me. And see, then when you work with kids, you indirectly work with their family too, their parents. You have to deal with their parents. And see, I'll be ready to beat somebody, mama or daddy ass, and I ain't trying to lose my life. So let's just keep it real, because a lot of the teenagers that come in are having issues with their parents, and some is just natural, regular family issues. But when you hear the trauma, I can't hear that from a child. I'd be ready to fight and end up without a license.
Yeah.
So no.
Yeah. And working with children who've been sexually abused or have, been treated like shit by their parents is very hard to hear. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, there's been situations where I've looked at parents like, what? But and looked at the child like you want to help them, and sometimes you're right, you do indirectly work with the parents. And I think that I think one of you guys brought up about working with parents, like, or having that, being educated on the development. And I think that parents need that. Parents need development courses, training, or something to understand how children work. It's almost like they have no, like, little education on, okay, when they get to this age, this is going to come up. They're going to start asking this question, or their body's going to do this. Instead, it's more of don't do that or stop doing that, instead of actually learning that your child is growing and developing.
One thing I like
and
about
these things
I
are
love
common
working
and
with
normal.
kids.
So
I work with everybody. I think my youngest client is 4 to maybe 62. So like I work all ages, and I love every single age. But kids, the thing I like about working with kids is that a lot of the problems that children manifest with stem from family systems. So a kid who's having problems in school, a lot of times you can look and say you can do all the educational testing in the world, and then when you find out that that child does not have any educational issues, then you start going to the family systems. Okay, what's going on in the home? The reason why I like to do it is because as a child myself, I had a lot of issues educationally. You wouldn't be able to tell now, but I didn't like school. I didn't want to be there. I didn't perform in school. I acted out in school. But at the same time, none of my teachers, not a school psychologist, not a school counselor said, well, why? Why? It was just, oh, this child is a problem. This child is a problem. But nobody has ever looked into the why. And so that's the part that I like, is looking into the why. And then when I look into the why, you go to the parents. And then you figure out, oh, okay, well, mom and dad are getting divorced. This child is acting out. And mom and dad don't have a child manual. They don't have there's no manual to parent your kids. And so I'm not as hard on parents, probably because I am one. So I'm not as hard on parents because there is no manual to parent your kids. But if there are resources out there, help me. And so that's what I do. I give out the resources. Okay, well, what do you need help with? Okay, well, let me observe your interactions with this child. And when I'm observing your interactions with this child, okay, did you have to threaten to slap her? Maybe you should have talked through that with her. Maybe instead of, talking negatively to her or saying, you should be doing this or you should be doing that, maybe you should teach her how to do it. And so just working through the family systems always helps the kids. So the parents typically do have some problems of their own, but think about like you as a parent, think about you growing. And then, the things that you do as a 25-year-old parent are not the same thing you're going to do as a 35-year-old parent. And so that psychoeducation is what the parents need. So I just give a little bit of grace.
I get the, and see, this is for our audience. This is why we are so diverse. Black therapists, Black women in general, we have different thoughts on everything. We are not always going to agree. I fully understand what Auntie Shiv just said. And I fully agree that everybody deserves grace, and I'm not a perfect parent. But when this child comes into an office and tells me that they have been harmed in a way that I just can't wrap my mind around, I'm ready to fight. Grace can come later after that good country ass whooping. So I'm just saying, that's why I said I can't do it. You have to know your limits. And that's I got adult clients that I be ready to fight for. I am very passionate about helping people. There are things that my clients will tell you. There are things that they will tell me about what's going on in their life with their partner or with their parents. Because, even as adults, you still have issues with your parents sometimes. They'll tell me these things, and I do the work with them. I do my treatment plans, all that good stuff. And I be like, Lord, I better not see their mama on the street. I might be mad. Like you have to know how to hold that, because I am so passionate, and you don't want to see anybody hurt. Trauma is the hardest thing to work with. So to see somebody hurting, to have a client crying in your office the whole session, and you got to ground them and regulate their nervous system, and to know that they didn't deserve that, and that's going to have such a major impact on so much of their mental state, I'd be ready to fight.
But one thing you're talking about when you say I'd be ready to fight is countertransference.
Yes, absolutely. This is why I have a supervisor and a therapist.
What's that? What does that mean?
Talk about that.
So what does that mean, Shiv? Is when you take on the client's emotions as if they're your own, and you have to be very careful with countertransference, because it's good to be passionate about your clients, but you could be putting your emotions back on them. And what you want to be is more of a blank slate for them to get their emotions off, because they can't hold your stuff and theirs. They need to work through their stuff, not through yours too. Exactly. And so with your therapist, you don't want to. When you're looking for a therapist, or when you're vibing with a therapist, you want to make sure that your experience is your own, and that you're not taking on their experiences. They're not sharing too much of their experiences with you, because, it's suggestive. How many times do we talk to our friends and, you mad, you third party mad. You mad because somebody said something to your friend, and you're like, now I'm mad. I'm third party mad.
Third party mad.
Countertransfer, third party mad.
Yes, and that's what we got to be careful of.
Detrimental to your clients.
Yes, absolutely agree. Which is, again, we go back to make sure the therapist that you find, because you're kind of touching on red flags for a therapist. Make sure the therapist that you find is comfortable with knowing their own limits. I won't work with kids because I know that the countertransference will be there. So the people that I do work with, super passionate, but able to keep that boundary. I might really feel it, but they don't know that. I mean, they won't know that. And then as far as, talking about yourself to your client as a therapist, I think for our people, that's a more relatable approach for many of them. Not everybody, because everybody's different. But for a lot of them, that can be a relatable approach. Self-disclosure is not 100% bad. It's a thing you have to be careful with. So the one teenage client I had, she wasn't going to open up to me if I didn't talk to her about me, if she felt like she didn't know me. It just wasn't going to happen. She was going to be quiet in those sessions, which a lot of people will do until they feel like, okay, I can trust you. So when you build that rapport with people, which is kind of that connection and that vibe, some people do need that. I had a client tell me one time, look, my last therapist talked about herself too much, so that's something I don't like. I knew from jump, do not self-disclose to that client. They don't want to hear it. So I didn't do it. But with other clients, they truly appreciate that, and they feel they trust you more, because it's like, all right, my therapist is invested in me. It's not just me pouring out my guts to this therapist and they can never answer a question that I ask about them or something like that. So self-disclosure is that tricky thing, but I'm way more direct as a therapist, and a lot of the things we learn in school, to me, were made to cater to white middle class people. So
Well, it's also the media too, right? So what does a therapist look like when you're watching a movie or when you're I don't know, look scrolling on YouTube or something? It's someone sitting in a chair with their notebook, sitting back while you're talking, looking and taking notes, right? But like people need to know that we're people. Our clients need to know that we're people too. So part of the self-disclosure, yes, it's a very tricky thing and you have to be really careful about not making it about you. But it also, I self-disclose every now and then too, because the feedback I've had from my past clients is like, I look at you as a person now. Like, you're not a doctor sitting in an office. You're someone that I can relate to, someone that I can try. I know that you have regular people experiences too. You're not any better than me. And so that has been really good with building a relationship and being able to talk about these things. So when you're selecting or looking for a therapist, that might be something that you look for. I've had lots of clients say, like, I really appreciate you sometimes sharing things that you've experienced because it made me feel comfortable. And I can trust you.
So we've all been talking about looking for a therapist or having a therapist, but what about individuals who don't have therapists, but rather they have life coaches or looking for life coaches?
Career field. Right
Don't
now,
do that,
I'm
Ashley.
actually looking into some life coach certifications because life coaching, although it gets a pretty bad rap, life coaching can get a pretty bad rap because there's no body governing the treatment. There's not a lot of evidence-based treatment. They can do a lot of things that counselors can do, but it's not necessarily evidence-based treatment, like we like to call it. And so one thing that life coaches do is they are more solution focused. They're kind of a guide, help to guide you through life, help to coach you through situations. How do you get through this? They can, talk about how your trauma might be affecting you, but it's more so what's going on with you right now and how do we get you past this right now? And so for some people that don't want to go into their past or don't want to talk about, why daddy did this or what their mother said or what their sister did, they want to go to a life coach and they want that, help me out now. And I think that life coaches can be very, very beneficial. But also, if you get somebody who's not well versed in what they're doing, it can also be detrimental too. So, one thing that's unique about life coaches and therapists, and that will be unique about me when I do it, or somebody like me, because I'm not trying to promote myself, but somebody that's like me also, that's a counselor and a life coach, and will be a life coach, is that whenever therapy is terminated from counseling,
Wait, you gonna be what?
whenever therapy
You
is
say you're gonna be what?
terminated, um,
No, you say you're gonna be a life
yeah,
coach?
I'm
Is
going to
that what you said?
coach.
Oh,
No,
you're in
I'm not
training to
in
be a
training
life
to be a life
coach.
coach. I'm looking for training to be a life coach. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I wanted to clarify because you just like slid that in like
Don't
wasn't
do
nobody gonna recognize that or anything. Like, oh yeah, when I do it. When I do it, and
That's
I'm like, what? Okay.
yeah.
All right, keep going. I'm sorry,
Everybody
I didn't mean to cut
slid
you off.
in.
Go ahead.
It's
Like,
vital. The reason why
yes
I'm
you
looking
did.
into it is not because I'm gung ho want to be a life coach, because guess what? I'm already a therapist. Is that I have clients who terminate. I have military clients. People move, and life coach transcends state boundaries, and counseling doesn't. And so sometimes it can be detrimental for a client to say, you know what, I'm sorry, I got to move, and I need a new therapist after you've been working with that client for years. But as a life coach, you can follow that client from state to state, or they can call you and you can coach them and not necessarily have to worry about insurance panels or their diagnosis. You can just really talk them through their life. So that's what's unique about life coaches, which is why I'm trying to make sure that I have as much under my belt so that I can help out my patients.
Okay. I know Auntie Amber saw my face when life coaches got brought up, and I know the audience probably saw my face too and probably like, oh, she don't like life coaches. No. Life coaches are good in their place. And see, with Auntie Shug, she has the license behind the life coach when she becomes a life coach. So that makes it totally different than just someone who's just a life coach. Not saying that someone who's just a life coach can't be good. Like she said, they usually do brief solution focused type of things to help you in that moment of your life, in that transition in your life, which is great. My issue with life coaches, from what I've seen in different clinical groups that I'm in, and just on social media and different clinical groups that I'm in, I don't appreciate life coaches who say that, who basically say, I can do whatever a therapist can do. No, you can't. You can't. And you can, and that can be very harmful. So if you're a life coach, be that. Don't tout yourself as something more than what you actually are. Life coaches are good. They are beneficial in a lot of ways. But a life coach, if you are dealing with severe trauma, that's not a life coach issue. And if a life coach tells you that they can handle that, they probably can't unless they have other type of credentials behind the life coach. So I've just seen a lot of people who've gone to life coaches. Well, not a lot, but some people who've gone to life coaches say that they were harmed. So I'm very leery of it, and I try to not be, biased or look down on it, but I'm just leery of it because of the horror stories I've heard. So that's where I'm like, be very careful when you're dealing with a life coach.
I personally had a life coach as, as my therapist, but my life coach had a background in social work. So we worked well together. She was a faith-based one, and I'm not even all into religion, but she was faith-based. And I met her 6 years ago in New York, and she lived in Connecticut and I lived in Ohio. So it worked out, and I worked with her for a year. And till this day, she's still, we still stay in contact, and she's doing her thing. So I'm not sure if I can shout her out or not, but you contact
I
me
do remember
personally,
when you
we
your
can
life coach.
give you her name.
Like I do remember, like you were not playing. You were like, okay, I got to be on this camera with my life coach. We
Mm-hmm.
going to go get some sushi, and you was like, before we go, I got to talk to my life coach. And like I do remember that, like that dark moment in your life, it got bright.
Well,
Yeah.
you mentioned that she
Yeah.
was faith based. So, like, just a question, right? I've heard about like these spiritual healing gurus and people that like make a lot of money off of that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, like, I guess my question for myself, but also for the audience, is when it comes to that realm of things, like faith based Christianity, religion, spiritual healing, whatever that realm is. Like, how do you identify where to go there too? Because I've always heard stay away from someone that labels themselves as a guru, but I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Well, for her, I would say personally, for me, for her, she didn't throw it in my face like we're only focusing on faith based. That's not how
Mm-hmm.
she did that. She was very well balanced in that area, and she rarely ever even brought up like God or any of that. So it wasn't focused on that. But I know that that's how she markets herself. But she was very well balanced in addressing whether I was like spiritually based, faith based, or if we needed to include that in the plan. But I felt for her
So
she was
when
well
I
Oh,
think
go
balanced in
ahead.
Nice,
that
yeah.
you're
nature.
actually, oh sorry, oh when you're actually looking for, um, some people, they're into spirituality, and it's 100% okay. Um, some people, when they want to go to marriage counseling, they want their pastor to do marriage counseling. Those are, your faith based healers. Or some people, a lot of faith based healers are, um they have credentials in counseling, or they have, a lot of them are in psychology, a lot of them are social workers, um just working like with the chapel and stuff like that. A lot of those they have the very same credentials that I do. And depending on what you're looking for, if you're a person that's like, you know what, I need God to guide me right now, and I want that counseling, but I also want somebody who's spiritual, that's when you go to the faith-based healers. Now, if you're a part of a certain community that doesn't believe in faith-based, then you're not going to go looking for the Christian counselor. It just makes like common sense.
And I want to say that it's not just, when we talk
Mm-hmm.
about faith-based healers, it's not just Christian counselors. There's so many different faiths. For me, I don't even though I have a background in
Mm-hmm.
Christian counseling, I do not promote that. Like, I don't promote myself as a faith-based counselor. I promote myself as a generalist who can work who has a faith background. So, and there's a reason that I do that. But I'm one of those people, unless you tell me that spirituality, you need that to be a part, I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not. You have to tell me I want this incorporated, or I'm struggling in this area, or I'm dealing with church hurt or something or another, and then we can do that. But I'm not going to just bring it in myself. I've had people come to me who've gone to other faith-based therapists, and they're like, well, it felt like they were using the Bible with therapy to make me change. And that's not okay, because we are supposed to be unbiased and non-judgmental. I've also been heavily studying other spiritualities. Like I've heavily started to look into African traditional religions, because it's important. And I feel like for my people especially, it's important to know that, because everything got demonized with colonization, and that's not okay. So when it comes to that, I let the client guide. If you want to incorporate that, or if you want to figure out where you're going spiritually, or you have questions, you want to deconstruct some things, we can do that. We can absolutely do that. But if you don't bring that up, I'm not going to bring that to you. I will say, with all of my clients, I do let them know that spirituality is a part of overall wellness from jump. Like, we're going to work on this, but I want you to know that the circle includes spirituality. I do ask that question on my intake. Do you have a belief? And they answer that question just fine. For those who don't, it doesn't come up. For those who put it down, sometimes it does. So that's kind of a client-led thing.
Yeah, and just a follow-up question off of that. This might take us somewhere else, but so you're talking about like letting the client guide your therapy. And I think it might be helpful for us to talk about different therapeutic approaches for people to look for when they're looking for a therapist, because some therapists put it up there like I'm CBT, I'm client-centered, I'm family systems or whatever, so that like we kind of know the different approaches.
Probably why I named this is part of the reason why my practice is called Eclectic Evolution Counseling, because I'm very eclectic. I pull from various different theories, various different approaches, but at the core, I am client-centered. I need the client to know that this is their journey, and I'm just here as a guide. I am not here to instruct or give answers or give advice. We can't give advice as therapists. So very much client-led. I have issues with certain other evidence-based theories, because they actually are not the best for people of color, depending on the situation. There's been a lot of flack for CBT. I do use CBT as well, but there's been some flack with CBT and some other theories as well and approaches. But for the most part, yes, I'm very much client, person-centered. It's all about the client leading everything.
Okay. What about you, Keisha?
First of all, I think every therapist is person-centered, because person-centered is like unconditional positive regard. So no matter what your patient is going through, people need to be valued as individuals, right? So, if they have problems with their mother, okay, I'm validating your experience. I'm looking at you like, no matter what you're doing, I still have positive regard for you. I still value you as a human who has an authentic right to go through all of these feelings that you're having, and I'm validating who you are and your experiences. So that's person centered. So I am person centered, and I do a lot of CBT, and I love CBT because, like I said, I think, therefore I am. And so CBT, and this, me as a Black therapist, I transcend all races. And with CBT, I transcend all races, because no matter what, your thoughts are not race. Your thoughts are not black and white. Your thoughts are not Hispanic. Your thoughts are the things that propel you through life or hinder you from living the kind of life that you want. And so I enjoy taking those, deconstructing some negative thought processes, and putting some positive stuff in there that helps you get through. So I do CBT, person centered. Actually, I'm just eclectic. Whatever you need at that time is what I'm doing. DBT. I got some borderline clients. I do some DBT. I mean, what you want? Every theory is based in cognitive behavioral theory. What you want? I got it. That's me. I be drinking like water.
Not every theory is based in cognitive behavioral.
Not every theory. I don't know about that.
No, it's not.
No.
And CBT
Mm-mm.
ignores too many systemic things. They don't take it, like you said, I think therefore I am. So where does I feel come in? Because emotions don't go into that. So CBT, they do, but I'm saying but when you
Yes,
make
they
that
do.
statement to somebody
Yes, they
like
do.
CBT, I think therefore I am, it's not clear. We know that they do, but that's not clear. It's like, okay, so just thoughts and behavior. It kind of, that's a whole nother thing we can get into. Let Keish say what she do.
So, well, let me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, can I respond to that real quick, Keish, before you say what you do? No,
Go
just
ahead.
because, like, with CBT, there is a feelings
I know.
piece in that. There's an emotions piece in that. It's not just thoughts and behaviors. So CBT, cognitive behavioral. I don't use the quote that Shug used. I think that's a quote that she is.
Yeah,
That a quote that
that's the
you
easiest. I
like use
simplify it.
yourself, or
No,
that's something that you've
yeah,
heard?
it's just simplified like that.
Okay. But yeah, I like CBT, but I don't like it alone. I think if you use CBT, you have to use it with another
Yeah.
approach for it to be culturally responsive. So I use CBT, but I combine that with family systems because, and I'm also, don't let me get started on
And don't
theoretical
nobody want
approaches because I'll
about
be up
Barbara
in here talking
Turner.
about this for the next 10 minutes. But I know. Okay, so I do family systems. So that is taking like the family unit and what are the influences within the unit and kind of changing how, not changing, shifting the mindset within. Well, I work with families too, so shifting the mindset of the parents, educating them, helping them see things from a different perspective. CBT goes into that because I'm working with you on your thoughts. If you think that your child is bad, then your feeling is frustration, and then you are going to lash out at your child. So at what point do we kind of like step in and say, okay, wait a minute, let me reframe that thought for a second so that I have a different feeling, a different emotion towards my child, and then I behave differently. So there is a huge part of that's like right in the middle of the thought and behavior when you're talking CBT. But again, I agree.
Yep.
CBT alone, it's too technical for it to be like fit with our community because we're just
it can't
we're
be used on
so
its own.
robust.
It can't
There's
be
a
used
lot
on
going
its
on
own.
with us, and we can't just take CBT and just go straight into it. But yeah, so sorry, Keish. I just had to throw that in there. I had to,
No.
yeah.
Get you think listen, I agree with all you guys. I do CBT and mostly DBT. However, a new theory was or approach was introduced to me a year ago, and that's acceptance
Yes.
and commitment therapy, which is
Yes.
ACT, which is a little deeper than CBT. And so I find bringing some like certain things from that approach into my therapeutic sessions. But with CBT is my core. But I'm starting to learn to change. Like I know it sounds a little bland, I guess. It's like a basic, but I'm starting to like change the language that is more culturally, like Amber was saying, responsive to the population I serve. So I'm actually working on this treatment protocol for Black women's maternal depression, and someone said, um, how are you fighting for this? Fighting for, change. And I was like, Black women are always fighting. Why can't we change the word to advocating? So it's just like those little things that we can change to make it more culturally responsive. And that's what I try to do with CBT. And so DBT, obviously, dialectical behavior therapy, created by Marsha Linehan. Uh, she created that, and I use a lot of things from DBT to address a lot of emotion dysregulation with a lot of my clients. Radical acceptance is a huge one for me that I use. And I walk people through the grief process when it comes to radical acceptance because we tell people to get over things all the time. Get over it. You should move on. You should do that. But I try to use these things in a way that people can use it for practical use. And it's going to be effective. But yes, CBT, DBT, and ACT
Yeah. So we
is
all
me.
have like a combination of different approaches here, and we kind of like use what we need for the client that's in front of us too. It's not just like one and done.
Still all goes back.
So
Hold on,
like,
what you say?
I said still all
sorry,
goes back to your thoughts.
I yeah.
huh?
No. You know, I use CBT, but
Come on
it's just
now.
I've heard I
Look,
think it's good for us as therapists
I
to always look at all sides of things. And I mean, we black women and we in this field, we know full well that this field was not created for us. These theories were not created for us. So at the end of the day, you can't be upset if black people in this field are now like, yo, these theories don't really fit culturally with us. They have to be tweaked or Amber. No, like
Bronfenbrenner fits
Amber.
wonderfully with us. So if you don't know,
But seriously,
please
I mean, we
look
can't
up Yuri
ignore.
Bronfenbrenner's social ecological theory
It does.
because
So I
it
don't agree with
explains
that.
it so well. Sorry.
I can't. I agree with the fact that it wasn't made for us, but since it's us doing it, we obviously tailor it to us.
Not everybody does
So
that.
we code switch.
You know full
I ain't
well.
gonna
You
do
know
what
full
they
well.
do,
There's
but
some therapists who I'm by the book. I follow the book. That's not us, but that is some therapists.
that's why you try on shoes.
Huh?
And that's annoying.
I said that's why
Y'all,
you try
I
on a
hate.
therapist like you
Oh,
try on your shoes.
sorry.
Because it's for
Exactly.
you. But as a therapist, when you are seeing a client, you tailor your therapy to the client. So you're not like, this theory has to work. Okay, if the theory doesn't work, you're not applying the theories to the clients. You're applying the
To the
clients to the
theories.
theories. You're putting their theories and you're working with them in a dynamic way to make it fit the client. So all that, like, oh, it's not created for black women. Guess what? We're black women and we're making it for us.
Right. And I get that. And that's all well and good. I'm just saying we can't be above critiquing the very field that we are in because it is not above reproach and it needs to be critiqued. And we need to break some of these chains and things that this field still has in it. I mean, when you have a situation like the APA apologizing in 2021 for racism in the field, yeah, like we knew that already. We knew that there was racism in this field. So, I mean, y'all should give me. Let me just tell y'all in our first episode. This is my cousin. We are actually related. We go at it all the time. We don't agree. We don't agree on a lot of stuff. We agree on a lot of stuff, and we don't. So we go at it all the time. So you're gonna see some real cookout-ish behavior sometime between me and Auntie Suge. But
so when she respectfully learns that I be right,
she ain't always
be
right.
better off.
She is not always right, and that's her problem. She an Aries, and she thinks she always right.
Sure, you are not always
anyway.
right. You're not. Okay, wait. One thing though, I know we have to wrap up, but before we wrap up this part of this segment, I did want to, because Shook was talking about like trying on therapists, like you try on your shoes, right? But sometimes there's limitations with insurance, certain types of insurance, that if you go to a therapist, like some therapists will offer free consultations where you can meet them and talk to them, get that vibe, and then select them as your therapist. But some don't. And then will your insurance accept that if you want to go to one person and you don't like them, and then you're going to another person, you're not vibing with them? Can you hop around like that when you're using insurance versus self-pay?
Sometimes you can't just say, "Oh, I'm gonna try this therapist," and try 7 different therapists in a year. It's probably not gonna be okay insurance wise. So you kind of got to do research. What'd you say? What'd she say?
Nothing.
What'd you say? What'd she say?
I said,
oh, no.
When you're doing that, you probably got some borderline stuff going on.
True. Yeah. True indeed.
7 different therapists.
You should be able to find a fit though within 1 to 3. I always tell people try it 1 to 3. If you ain't found a fit, we might need to talk about something. But 1 to 3, you should just do your research on therapists. I mean, if you go to places like Psychology Today or Therapy for Black Girls, you can pull people up, read their profile. You can get to know them beforehand. It's always really good to look up therapists beforehand, see their picture, especially if you are not a person of color. Like, look up and see what this therapist look like before you get shocked when you walk in the office and it's me or Suge or Keish or Amber. So, yeah.
So basically, overall, we're just saying like all therapists have different approaches. It's good to do your research beforehand. Auntie Ashley's definitely going to share some facts about looking for therapists, different resources. So you'll have that to take away with you. That's kind of like your to-go plate from the cookout today, right? Anything else we want to close out with or add before we?
Oh. We hope y'all liked it. We do. We want y'all feedback too.
Soundstripe.
So, what do y'all think about this whole idea of parents like wanting their kids to struggle because they struggle?
I agree with teaching them to fish and not just providing all the fish.
We have the luxury of providing certain things to our kids that your parents didn't have the luxury to do at the time. So, why not?
I also don't like the idea of parents who are like, well, I'm eating steak and shrimp, but you getting chicken fingers. Why?
And I remember he said, he's like, I wish my kids had a little bit of struggle. He said, because they do not understand what it's like to not have no electrical. They don't understand what it's like to figure out ways to survive.